What sounds like fiction, but is actually a real historical event. The Soviet scientists starving to death saving the seed bank of Leningrad during Hitler's invasion in the winter of 1941-42 despite it being full of corn, wheat and potatoes. What happened? They ran out of food, but couldn't eat anything from the seed bank since they needed to preserve its stocks. Wojtek was a bear who fought Nazis in return for cigarettes and beer. He didn't die until 20 years after WW2. My favorite part about that story is that after the war he lived in a zoo. It was common for soldiers from the bear's company to come visit and simply jump into the enclosure to play with him, much to the zookeeper's annoyance. That is so cool. I hadn't heard that part of the story before. The escape from Antarctica by the members of the Antarctic expedition led by Ernest Shackleton. The stuff they went through was unbelievable. Their boat, the Endurance, was crushed by ice floes. They were stranded on the floes for over a year in temperatures well below freezing. They then took to 3 boats around 22 feet in length across the Antarctic Ocean looking for land. There were about 10 men in each boat. They missed reaching land by just a few miles at times. 2/3 of them got stranded on Elephant Island surrounded by ice, while one of the boats went out in search of rescue. That boat made it through the Drake Passage, one of the deadliest places in the ocean. All but 3 of them got stranded with little food and water, while the 3 men who left became the first people to cross South Georgia on foot. They found civilization, rescued the men who came through the Drake Passage, waited months until they could rescue those on Elephant Island. Every single person who came on the initial voyage survived, with the worst lasting consequence being a single foot amputation. I'm shocked that this has not been made into a major movie or mini-series. There is a fantastic documentary called The Endurance. The trip was partially funded through shooting wildlife footage, so they happened to have cameras. Unbelievable images of their experience. Highly recommend it. The CIA was researching psychic abilities for 30 years as a way to spy on the USSR. After 30 years, the program was terminated, and their conclusion was that psychic powers probably don't exist. Edit. The actual conclusion was that the evidence for remote viewing was unfalsifiable and therefore unprovable. Many of the more promising results were believed to be caused by information leakage, meaning that test subjects had prior knowledge about the subject they were asked about. They were unable to verify any of their results because of this, and even if the psychic abilities were real, they were unreliable at best. Edit 2. The codename for the project was Stargate. You can find the documents on the CIA website. Here link. CIA.gov/library/re-adding room/collection/Stargate. The Men Who Stare at Goats. The opening of that film will stick with me forever. More of this is true than you would believe, is just so eloquent in its simplicity. Apparently. /Zazero left square bracket death /Zazero from Laughterlink. M. Wikipedia. org/wiki/death_from_laughter is an incredibly rare, but a completely legit cause of death. In the 3rd century BCE, Chrysippus, a Greek Stoic philosopher, died of laughter after he saw a donkey eating his figs. And Chrysippus is not the only isolated case. Among the few other cases, a 5th century BCE Greek painter, Zeuxis, is said to have died laughing at his painting of the goddess Aphrodite, for which an old woman, who had commissioned the painting, had insisted on modeling. Also, Cleopatra, the ruler of Egypt in the 1st century BCE, claimed that her retainer died laughing at her husband's death. According to the linked Wikipedia article, the most recent case is that of Ole Benson, a Danish audiologist, who saw a funny scene in a comedy film and laughed so hard that his heart rate rose to a point where he had a fatal heart attack in 1989. From what I understood from reading up on this topic, it's not the act of laughing itself, but rather a fatal repercussion from a fit of laughter, such as cardiac arrest, asphyxiation or aneurysm, which causes death. For instance, Ole Benson suffered a heart attack as a consequence of the terrible fit of laughter he had. It's possible that such was the case of Chrysippus and others as well. I always thought of "I'm gonna die laughing" as a hyperbole, and I myself use it quite liberally, but I guess every hyperbole has a grain of truth to it. close bracket. Is a donkey eating figs really that funny? You had to be there. Jack Link. M. Wikipedia. org/wiki/jack_baboon, a baboon who was employed to change rail signals. After initial skepticism, the railway decided to officially employ Jack once his job competency was verified. The baboon was paid 20 cents a day and a half bottle of beer each week. It is widely reported that in his 9 years of employment with the railroad, Jack never made a mistake. An official investigation was initiated after a concerned member of the public reported that a baboon was observed changing railway signals at Uitenhage near Port Elizabeth. Can you ducking imagine? Yes. In my mind I'm imagining a drunk man on the train. He looks out the window, sees the baboon, looks back inside, suddenly shakes his head in disbelief and looks outside again. Sure enough, the baboon is right there. He looks at the bottle in his hand and then begins to pour it out. The Great Stink was an event in central London in 1858. The hot weather exacerbated the smell of untreated human waste and industrial effluent that was present on the banks of the River Thames. Link. Wikipedia. org/wiki/GREAT_STINK/MEDIA/FILE. The_silent_highwayman. JPG. The Great Stink led to London building its sewer system. Only because the MPs could smell it in Parliament. Common folk had complained about how smelly it was for a while. The government did duck all until it started affecting them. Nothing's changed. President Andrew Jackson's funeral in 1845. His pet parrot had to be removed because it was swearing loudly. And he also left a giant rotting cheese wheel to his successor Van Buren. He had received two as a gift, and he held a giant party in the White House where people could just show up and drink and eat of the first £1,200 cheese wheel gift. But the other remained in the cellar for 2 years till Van Buren took over. Don't underestimate cheese. A 72-pound wheel of Parmigiano Reggiano sells for about $900. Properly cared for, that could have been a literal fortune's worth of cheese. An English king named Ethelred, later called the Unready, took some troops to defend against a Viking invasion. The weather was bad, so a lot of the Vikings' ships crashed as they were landing. Ethelred thought that it would be dishonorable to attack them as they were stumbling onto shore, so he kept his troops back until the Vikings had a chance to get together and form proper battle lines before he attacked them. The better prepared Vikings then won the fight and slaughtered a bunch of Ethelred's men, and he and the rest were forced to run away while the Vikings went around pillaging. Also, his sobriquet does not mean unready in the modern sense, as in unprepared, but rather ill-advised. Ethelred, the name meaning well-advised. A hilarious pun. There are 3 separate defenestrations of Prague. The word defenestration was coined to describe the third one. The defenestrated parties survived in the third one. The Catholics claimed angels helped them down. The Protestants claimed they landed on a dung heap. Historians think they survived because they were only on the second floor. To this day, political protests in Prague often involve defenestrating someone in effigy. The defenestrated parties survived in the third one. The third defenestration happened 1948 and is a name for the suspicious death of Jan Masaryk. You're referring to the second defenestration. Jean de Clisson, 1300 to 1359, was married to a French nobleman who was beheaded for treason by the French king. Enraged, she sold their estate and purchased 3 black warships with red sails, and became a pirate queen of the English Channel who targeted French ships. She became known as the Lioness of Brittany, and in her 13 years of piracy she would slaughter every member of a ship's crew except for one, so that last survivor could go back and tell the French king what had happened. Why do I feel like the 1300s never get talked about? They focus on the Black Plague. Everything else gets lost by the wayside because that was so massive. Due to a military standoff that took years, 15 ships became stranded in an inland sea, and over 8 years formed a multinational ship-based society that even included its own currency. Link. That sounds dope. Google the Yellow Fleet. The yellow was because of blowing sand that gradually just accumulated on the ships. Louis XIX was king of France for 20 minutes. The shortest war ever recorded was around 40 minutes long. During the Salem witch trials, dogs were also accused of witchcraft. 2 dogs were executed because of it. Was the 40-minute war between the British and natives of the island of Zanzibar? Yes. It's clocked at between 38 to 45 minutes. A Russian Tsar had a bomb thrown at him, avoided it, and thought it was a good idea to stay there to look at the damage. Enter second guy with bomb. Assuming you mean Alexander III, Lenin himself watched the execution of his brother in a slightly earlier assassination attempt. It was Alexander II. The Roman Emperor Caligula once declared war against Neptune, god of the ocean. He led his soldiers to a beach and instructed them to stab the water. Would have won, too, had he recruited the Sand Guardian. Hey, thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.